Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today is going to be another installation or how-to video. Unfortunately, uh, haven't been feeling well, so I posted on Instagram that I wasn't going to do a video of this DIY because I was too sick, and setting up the camera, doing the angles and all this stuff, it really takes so much more time. Like, the job itself is so easy, but to set up the camera and film when you're sick, it's gonna take all day just to do it. So I will walk you guys through what I did with the removal, but this video is gonna be mostly focused on reinstalling those wheels instead. And I will send the link on the description below or up here above on another YouTuber that actually did this DIY on YouTube for a 850 GS. So hope you guys still enjoy the video. So as you can see, the garage is small and it's hard to set up a camera stand. So I'm actually just using my camera phone to film this right now. And I'm gonna set up my GoPro later once I start the reinstallation. And for simplicity's sake, I'm just gonna walk you guys quickly on how to do the removal on the front, then the rear wheel, how to jack up your motorcycle. Obviously the 750 GS, I'll start with the 750 GS. It doesn't have a center stand. This one anyway doesn't. So I have a bash plate right here, and I just literally put the motorcycle jack under the bash plate like that. Jack up the motorcycle enough to lift both wheels off the ground. And then just for support, I added this plywood and some gloves and some jack stands just to support the swing arm. And so what I did actually was I started with the rear wheel. So I'll talk to you guys what's going on there with things hanging and stuff. To make life simple, loosen the axle bolts for both the front and rear before you lift the bike up off the ground. The rear axle uses a 34 millimeter wrench. And actually, funny story is that I used my Go Bag travel kit wrench. I actually used this to remove the axle nut on the rear wheel of the 750 GS. So this is from Cruise Tools. And of course, since I'm at home, I used my breaker bar right here. I put the wrench through the breaker bar so it was easier. And then I realized, since I'm not recording, I have some time to run to the store. So then I went to AutoZone and got the big wrench out so I could use the ratcheting wrench and make my life easier since I'm not on the road fixing the bike. Next is loosening up the chain tension. So this screw here, I didn't want the chain to be hanging down, so the screw, I just literally loosened it up. I made a note where the positioning was on this thing. There's lines here. You see these lines here when you're adjusting your chain tension, and I have a video about that too. So mine was originally all the way in with just one line. Actually, both were the same on both bikes. But obviously, when putting all of this back together, we're gonna measure that chain tension and set it according to how it's supposed to be, and not just rely on that. A little cheat sheet for the measurement for the chain slack is right there. Now moving over to the back of the motorcycle here, you'll see that I didn't need to remove the caliper to remove the wheel. All I did was, when it's time for me to move the wheel out of the bike, I pumped the jack a little bit, just very little, to move it up so that it releases itself from this. I never actually took the caliper off the bike, but Some people find that easier. What you need to do, it's just literally, and make sure it's not resting on it. That centerpiece there, that notch with where the arrow's pointing, basically that thing rests on the swing arm where there's a point sticking out. That little hook there goes into there, and that's how it sits on it. Before you take the wheel out, the very first thing I did, because I don't want to damage it, is this sensor here. So I removed the sensor first. Didn't want to wiggle the wheel out and accidentally damage this sensor. For the 850 GSA, even though it has a center stand, I just feel like it's better to use a jack since it's available. If it's not available, obviously I would have used the center stand. And once again, I'm a little paranoid of the bike toppling over, so I put jacks to support the rear of the bike so it doesn't tilt. Because I felt like after I took both wheels off that it was leaning towards the rear more, like favoring the rear more, and I didn't want it to topple over, so I put those just in case. The procedure is basically the same for both bikes, 750 and 850. So same thing, took out the ABS sensor, and it's same thing, it's just sitting there like that. I didn't need to remove it when I wiggled it out. I just, like I said, all I did was I jacked up the bike more so that the wheel can move down and out. What I do want to show you that's slightly different is the slack for the 850 GSA versus the 750 GS. So on here, on the swing arm, you'll see that it says 40 to 50 millimeters. So obviously, all bikes are gonna be similar concept. In terms of specs of chain tension and sag, most BMWs have this little sticker here that tells you, oh, you know, quick reference, but that's also in your owner's manual, so just check that out. Make sure you got the correct setting on your bike. Now we're moving on to the front of the motorcycle. So the first thing that I did is to remove the fender. So for the 750 GS, you're gonna need to remove 1, 2, 3, 4 screws off the fenders to take it out, and it's a T25 Torx. To remove the ABS on both front and rear, you will need a T30 Torx. You're gonna have to remove the bracket that holds the caliper, the front calipers anyway, to the forks, and the bolts for that uses a T50 Torx. So this is the bracket that holds to this, bolts onto here to hold the caliper to the front, and that's T50 Torx. So now the pinch bolts, you loosen the pinch bolts before you go and loosen the axle, and you use a T40 to remove, or sorry, to loosen these. I removed mine. You don't need to remove it. I didn't remove it for the 850 GSA. I was just, I don't know what I was thinking. I was very sick when I was working on the bike. Anyways, next is this, and you are gonna have to use a hex 12 key. So here you go. Hex 12, and it uses a 1/2 inch ratcheting wrench. I think that's what you call that, this tool, right? Isn't this a ratcheting wrench? I never know the correct names for these things. Anyways, I either at some point need to buy an adapter because I like to only bring the 3/8 wrench, and this is a 1/2 inch, and I won't be able to use it on the road unless I have a 1/2 inch wrench or an adapter that adapts to make this fit into a 3/8 wrench. Anyways, that's just a nitpick because I want my tools to be able to work when I'm on traveling also. So I happen to have these bungee cords for other purposes, but I didn't want the calipers to be just dangling on their lines because I don't want it to be pulling. So I put the bungee cord on one of the bolt holes here, and I just literally connected it to my bark buster up there. But you don't need a bungee cord like that. If you don't have it, any string or rope will do. As you can see, I don't have enough bungee cords. And at first I was like, I'm gonna use the rock straps. And I'm like, that's excessive. So I have some twine, and I literally just used twine to hang the 850 GSA caliper. And I didn't want it to scratch the fender, or is this called, I don't know what this is called, Fender or whatever, or something. Anyways, I didn't want it to scratch, so I put some used glove there. And same thing, I put the twine wrapping around the bark buster on the 850 GSA. There's some minor differences between the 750 GS and the 850 GSA. So for the fender bolts for the 850 GSA, you're gonna need a T30 and to remove them, and they actually have 6 of them here. So you need to remove 6 screws, and they are T30, unlike the 750 GS that uses the T25, which is a smaller Torx. And because of this intricate design here compared to that, it takes some finagling to get it out. They're very, what do you call this, flexible. They're very flexible, so you just have to unhook the lines from the holders here, and you can maneuver it carefully out without much trouble. I was able to take it out without taking this out of here, and that's how I hang the thing, as you can see there. I'll show you the other side. So here's the other side, and you see how the lines kind of connect. And I didn't want anything to be pulling, so I'm literally hanging both sides on for this on a twine. And same procedure, T50 to remove the anchor off of the forks. Now really the challenge is gonna be putting things back together. It's always easier to take things apart, but when it's time to put them together, there's gonna be a little bit of challenge. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about in just a second. So it's time to put the front wheel back on the 750, but before I do that, I want to make sure that I have room here on the calipers to slide the rotors back in. So all I did was get a flathead and basically just move the piston back so that I have space here. Just takes a little bit of wiggling. I think I have enough space on this side. I gotta do it on the other caliper. I'm basically just pushing it back. So I'm gonna do it on the other caliper. There you go, it's moving. I'm just at an awkward angle right now. It's so much easier on the other side because I have more space. Okay, it's pushing in. The other side. Pushing the other side. Slowly. There you go. It's going in. It's going in. Okay, so after I made room for the rotors to go in on the calipers, now it's time to put the wheels in. But don't forget to replace the spacer. I had to double check because one spacer is bigger than the other, and because I didn't record myself taking the wheels off, now I had to figure it out instead of watching my own video. And this is the reason why I record my DIYs. It's literally mainly for myself because I come back and have to redo the same job over and over again, and I don't have the best memory. Anyways, just a tip there is, obviously I found out that the spacer for the front is smaller, so if you happen to put all of the parts together, and you're confused like I was for a second there, the bigger one goes with the rear. And this one will go with the front. So we're gonna put this back. The wheel will go like this. The ABS sensor is gonna be on the left side, and then the spacer is gonna go right there. That's what the owner manual says. It's still greased adequately, so I'm not gonna re-grease it. Make sure this is an easier way to go about this is find a screwdriver and use the butt end of it and hit it with a hammer to put this all the way back inside, because as you can see, it has to be recessed, and if you hammer just this, you will damage it obviously, and then also you can't hit just this because it has to be recessed a little more, like as you can see here. I'm putting back the caliper bolts. So it's T50 Torx, and because I already spread the brake pads apart, it's easy to put it back on. So you just put it together like this. We'll torque everything down in a little bit. Sensor back. Before I put back the ABS sensor, it looks like they use blue thread locker on it. So I'm gonna reapply a little bit of thread lock. The owner's manual doesn't say anything about lubricating the axle, by the way. The only reason I did it is because when I took it off, there's lubricant on it, and I was reading on the internet and other people are putting Wally paste on it. So ABS sensor, we just do thread lock. We use blue thread lock, but not we just do a snug fit. Now just putting the calipers back on the right side, and it's a T50 Torx as well. I made a mistake on the sequencing of how you tighten the pinch bolts versus the axle bolt. It's a very specific sequence and I messed it up on this install video. So do not follow what I'm doing on this part. And on part 2 of this video, I followed it really closely as best as I can. And that should be the correct way to do the sequence of install for the pinch bolts, tightening, and the axles. That way the alignment will not get messed up. The instructions are written in the owner's manual, but I was having a really hard time understanding what it means. So I actually had to ask my partner's opinion on how he understood the instructions. And he understood it, of course, differently from how I understood it. But also, he speaks English as a first language and I don't. So there you go. So the rationale behind this is that you do not tighten anything that's connected between the forks and the wheel. You just put them all together, but don't tighten them because you need to compress the forks right from the, not from the handlebar, but right on top of the forks themselves, going straight down to make sure that everything gets aligned before you torque everything down. Hurt anything. Yeah, that's what I'm doing anyway, so you guys are free to do what you feel more comfortable about. So the vibration won't shake it off. Okay, time to put the bolts back for the fenders. You're gonna use a T25 Torx for the 750 GS. Now it's time to move on to the installation of the rear wheels. So here, the caliper, I want to push the piston out. Same thing I did to the front before I do anything. So I'm gonna get that flathead. So I am actually gonna take this out. Right there. Just little, see the piston going back inside the caliper. That's what we want, because we don't want that in our way, as if it's not already annoying enough when trying to put the axle back in. So that's just something to decrease our headache. Rear wheel, this big thing goes back in here. Don't forget that there's this spacer here too that goes there. The spacer is gonna go on the side where the ABS sensor is, which is the right side. Before I put back the axle, I actually want to clean it real quick and just add a little bit of moly paste on it. Now I'm just putting the rear wheel back on, and as you can see, I didn't need to take out the caliper out of its holder. I put the axle back, put moly paste. This is the tricky part, is just lifting it just enough to line up the holes. Just pushing the wheel in more so I can put the chain back on. Now I'm just setting the chain tensioner bolts to its original setting, which is one line out. Spacer, nut, this ABS sensor just goes back in. Put a little bit of thread locker, T30 Torx. There's no torque spec for the ABS sensor bolt, you just put it in snug. Before I can tighten the rear wheel, I have to adjust the chain tension because we took the chain off. So that's what I'm doing right now. So the tensioner screws here uses a T45 Torx. So when I first started, there was only one line that's out. Right now there's 3 lines that's out. So when you loosen it, you're loosening the chain. So let's go on the other side and do that. Make sure they're even. Then we still have to measure it afterwards. So I'm adjusting this side so I can see one line, just like it is on the right side. You have to make sure that the chain tensioner bolts are seated right on the swing arm. So now I'm gonna tighten this back, 100 Newton meters to tighten this back. Okay, so I am officially done with the 750 GS, and I already uploaded a video of how to do checking your chain tension. So if you guys are interested in doing that, you guys can click on the link above. Otherwise, actually this video is starting to be longer than I had hoped, so I am making a part 2 of this installation for the 850 GSA. I really hope you guys liked this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next video. Thanks again for watching.